But so you go into your doctor and you complain, and what you're really looking for is hope and answers to get this fixed. But what you walk out the door with is sleeping pills, antidepressants, and what we're doing is we're putting Band-Aids over these symptoms.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Evolving Ageless podcast. This is the enlightened woman's antidote to aging. So I'm Michelle Dreilich, and I'm your host, and I am on a mission to change the way women age. So each week, I'm joined by guests and experts that are up on the latest research, and they're sharing their experiences with us to help us live ageless. Okay, so let's dive in. Today's talk is one, it's very timely right now, but it's also one that I feel like we give a lot of lip service to without really diving in and taking it as seriously as it is. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to my guest today, Dr. Deb Matthew. Hi, Dr. Deb. How are you?
I'm great, and I'm so happy to be here talking about this.
Wonderful. We are excited to hear all about your experience in this area. So, Dr. Deb, just by way of background, she is a best-selling author. She's a speaker. She's a physician. She's a wife and a mom. So she burns the candle at both ends, just like the rest of us. And she's a frequent guest on TV shows, talk shows. She's well known in this area, and she has a book called This Is Not Normal, A Busy Woman's Guide to Symptoms of Hormone Imbalance. So I know we've talked about hormones before, but we've not spent hardly any time backing the boat all the way up and starting where the hormones cascades sometimes go wrong, and that's with stress and cortisol. So, Dr. Matthew, tell us about this whole process of stress and how, first, let's start at the big level. Like, how does it lead to aging?
Well, stress is a huge cause of hormone imbalances for women. It's a huge cause of chronic disease, and we kind of know that. And the underlying mechanism for how all this works is that when you're stressed, your cortisol level rises, and cortisol is the hormone that helps you cope with stress. So if this is a short-term problem, like there's a fire in the house, your cortisol level will shoot up, you'll run outside, the fire department will come, everything's okay, and then cortisol goes back down to normal and you get on with your world. The problem is when you have chronic stress day in, day out, cortisol levels stay chronically elevated. And that is not good for our health. And one of the primary things that it does is it ages us at an accelerated rate. And, one of the ways that we kind of illustrate this sometimes is when you look at a picture of any one of the presidents on the day they take office, and then you look at a picture of the day they leave office, the gray hair, the wrinkles, they just look like they've aged so much in such a short period of time. And that's an example of stress and how it affects us.
Wow, that is really cool. It's true, because we comment about that every year when a president, or every 4 years or 8 years when a president leaves office, like, wow, look how they've aged. I think everyone does that. So it's a really good example. Great. So let's talk about this, because I know, listen, I've always said this, I burn the candle at both ends and in the middle just to make sure it's charred, right? And we used to wear it as a badge of honor, right? I think for women, it's a really common thing to say, like, oh, I'm so busy, or I'm so stressed. And it just flows.
We feel like our role is to serve. Women are caregivers, and we look after everybody else, and we put ourselves last. But just like on the airplane, when the oxygen mask comes down, we know we're supposed to put our mask on first. We know why, right? We're no good to anybody if we're on the floor. But in our day-to-day lives, we tend to go and do and give and serve, and we don't really take care of ourselves. But when we are under chronic stress and it's affecting our cortisol levels, we can feel tired. And there's a pattern that we commonly see, which is that it's hard to drag yourself out of bed in the morning. Even if your alarm goes off, you want to press snooze a couple of times. You kind of crawl yourself over to the coffee pot because you need a little caffeine to get yourself moving. And caffeine helps to boost cortisol levels a little bit so that your brain can function like a normal human being. But so it takes a little bit to get moving in the morning. And then you're okay for a while until late afternoon, the bewitching hour, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, where we get this slump and you feel like you need another cup of coffee or some sugar or something just to get you through till dinner. And then for most people, then by supper time, they're okay again. But shortly after supper, 7:30, 8 o'clock, kind of earlier than you would really go to bed, we find ourselves sitting on the couch, coming nodding off in front of the TV. But if we stay up late enough, past say 10 p.m., then our brain sometimes gets a second wind. And then we're up and we're getting stuff done. And then, of course, it can be hard to fall asleep. And then that darn alarm comes just too early in the morning again. That is a really, really common pattern that we see. And in fact, it's become so common that we just think of it as being normal. It's normal to need caffeine in the morning. It's normal to kind of feel tired in the afternoons. It's normal to need sleeping pills and, 5-hour energy drinks. But it's not normal. It's stress affecting your hormones, and that's not normal.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. So I would be lying if I said that didn't describe me at some point in my life, right? I think it describes most of
Yeah.
us. I hear it time and time again myself. So let's really dive in and talk about cortisol, right?
Yeah.
It's a hormone just like other hormones, right? And tell us about that
Yeah.
orchestra.
So cholesterol, which we all think of as bad and you need Lipitor, but cholesterol is actually the building block for these hormones and for vitamin D, which is really important too. So cholesterol is not necessarily a bad thing, but your body can use cholesterol to make a whole bunch of your hormones. So estrogen and progesterone and testosterone and cortisol. And you have a limited number of resources, but cortisol is a survival hormone. So this one takes priority. And if you have a lot of chronic stress, your body will sacrifice the other hormones in order to make sure that you're able to make enough cortisol. So when you are stressed, you can end up with more PMS symptoms because progesterone is the hormone that comes kind of right before cortisol in this whole cascade. And progesterone deficiency increases PMS symptoms like moodiness or irritability or not sleeping before your period or feeling more anxious or having night sweats leading into your period or just not sleeping soundly, heavier periods, more PMS that lasts longer, like instead of 2 days before your period, like a week, 10 days, 2 weeks before your period. So when you have a lot of stress, it can cause menstrual problems, heavy periods, more PMS. Another way that this interrupts how we feel is if you are menopausal or perimenopausal, going through the whole process of menopause, then your body wants to make enough estrogen and testosterone and the other hormones so that you can just slide right through this menopausal process and no big deal. But when you are chronically stressed and the resources are going to make cortisol, you are more likely to have more hot flashes and mood problems and memory problems and a lot of the symptoms that we think of as menopause, but it's not all because of an estrogen deficiency. It can be because of a cortisol problem. So there are some women who go right through menopause. They never have a hot flash. They don't really know what the fuss is all about. We even know from medical research that if we take women who are going through menopause or having symptoms and we put them on a vacation, we give them massages, we pamper them, that cortisol levels get better and the hot flashes get less. So wouldn't it be awesome if your doctor could write a prescription for you to go lay on the beach for a few weeks to get rid of your hot flashes? Sadly, not covered by Blue Cross
Wonderful,
Blue
wouldn't it?
Shield.
Probably not. But
Yeah.
I think the really cool thing here is this cascade. We call it a cascade, right? I
Right.
think of it almost as a river, right? Up the river, at the very top of the river is where things like progesterone and cortisol get made, right? And so
Right.
in this chronic place of stress, you're actually stealing the ingredients you need to make progesterone, right?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so they even call it stealing, right?
Right. The
Clinically.
progesterone steal. Yeah.
Right, right. And so you're using all the raw materials that your body needs, the building blocks that make estrogen down the road, testosterone down the road. We have 3 kinds of estrogen. We need all 3.
Yeah.
So we go through this. So we're up the river and the catastrophes happening up there with cortisol.
Right.
So down the river, it's just a trickle. It's
Right.
not a stream, right?
That's right. And what I see happening, so downstream, what women feel is tired, not sleeping, can't lose weight, anxiety, depression, food cravings, hair falling out. I mean, these are such common symptoms. But so you go into your doctor and you complain, and what you're really looking for is hope and answers to get this fixed. But what you walk out the door with is sleeping pills, antidepressants. And what we're doing is we're putting Band-Aids over these symptoms. And really, the underlying problem is often our hormones. And the reason that we have hormone problems in the first place is often because of how stress is affecting our hormones.
Absolutely. In fact, it's one of the, drivers of premature menopause.
Yes.
It's one of the drivers of,
Infertility.
we've talked about infertility.
Yeah.
We've talked about perimenopause.
Mhm.
Perimenopause is this stage before you've gone 12 months without a period, right? So
Right.
perimenopause, the length of it is different for everybody.
And it can be many years.
Right. That's my understanding. And so I've heard even up to a decade, right? Depending on if all the factors, the perfect storm exists for how a woman lives, right? And we're going to talk about lifestyle stuff too. But
because there's things we can do about this, which is important.
Which is hopeful, right?
Yeah.
That's the difference, where most practitioners will tell you, this is aging. You're getting old. You're
you just
going
have to
through
live with it.
menopause. Yeah.
That's so frustrating. Yeah.
Oh, as a clinician, for you, I bet it is, right?
Yes.
Because just so everyone knows, in the functional medicine, integrative medicine world, or any doctor that treats a root cause or takes a root cause approach, no matter what we label it, because the labels don't matter. The point is, when a patient comes to you having been put on antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication, sleeping pills that we know have a real downstream effect on health, when they do that, they're just Band-Aids, right?
That's right. And there's so much that we could do to fix the underlying problem so that you don't need those medications and put up with their potential side effects.
So real quick, tell us about cortisol. So now we know cortisol is a good thing when there's immediate stress. It's a bad thing when it's happening all the time.
Right.
What does that have to do with aging and muscle and all of those other things?
So when you have chronic stress, what happens is cortisol levels become too high. They're chronically elevated. And high cortisol is toxic to a whole bunch of things in your body. Cortisol is a wear and tear hormone, as opposed to things like estrogen and testosterone that are build and repair hormones. So if you have a lot of cortisol and maybe not so much of the other ones, then you are doing too much wearing and tearing. So you lose bone at a faster rate. It pushes you to osteoporosis. You lose muscle at a faster rate. And we know that we naturally lose muscle with age. And you think about those frail little old ladies and their arms are like toothpicks. They don't even have the strength to stand up out of their chair. And when you're frail like that, your immune system is not strong and you're at risk for all kinds of infections. And that's not what any of us want for ourselves. So when you have too much cortisol, it just pushes you towards that. The medical word for that is sarcopenia. It shrinks your hippocampus. Cortisol shrinks your hippocampus, which is the part of your brain responsible for short-term memory. Where did you leave the car keys? Why did you walk in the room? What's that person's name? So it pushes us to dementia. High cortisol pushes us to diabetes. It makes us gain weight right on our middle. Like, how many people are struggling with that darn belly fat they just can't get rid of? So gray hair, wrinkles, thinning skin, like none of these things are good. And eventually over time, your system can't always keep up with putting up all this cortisol, and it tries to kind of correct itself. Or sometimes the stress is just so much, it's almost as though your body flips a breaker switch to try to protect you from all this excess cortisol. And then what can happen is cortisol levels can drop inappropriately. So it's your body trying to protect itself from too much cortisol. But when your cortisol level is too low now, really everything is worse because cortisol is regulating your sleep-wake cycle. It's a regulating hormone. It regulates your other hormones, your blood sugar, your immune system function. Now all these things become dysregulated. They're not regulated, and you have more problems. And you feel often worse. So this is when you feel exhausted, overwhelmed. Every little thing feels stressful. Like just getting to the grocery store, unloading the groceries and getting them put away feels exhausting. So whether it's high or low, sometimes we see too high at one time of the day, too high at the other, too low at the other time of the day. But we can measure this. And that's a really important thing, because if you go to your family doctor, your gynecologist, and ask to have your cortisol level measured, they know how to do it if they're looking for really bad diseases. There's tumors that can make way too much cortisol, or there's a disease where your adrenal glands are broken and they can't make cortisol. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about stress and how it's impacting our body and our function. So those tests aren't going to help us.
Right. And the tests that I've heard that, or we've used in the past, they're usually a 4-point cortisol, right? So it's during those moments that you mentioned, when you wake up, that afternoon, that evening, and that bedtime, and what's going on. And there should be a wonderful curve, right? You should wake up with cortisol, and then you're slowly prepare for the end of the day by depleting your cortisol throughout the day.
How I try to explain it to people is cortisol is like long-acting adrenaline. So it's like we get this little adrenaline boost first thing in the morning, and then your eyes pop open and you leap from your bed ready to start your day. And then, like you said, it goes down so that you're calm and relaxed at night and you can sleep through the night. We see all the time that it gets flipped around and backwards. So it's too low in the morning and you're dragging your butt out of bed trying to get moving, but then it's too high at night and then you're lying in bed with your eyes wide awake and you can't sleep. But it can be up and down through the day, and that pattern is what's really important. So not only is it too high or too low, but what is the pattern? And so we need to do it 4 times in the day to see your pattern. And it can be done in saliva testing, it can be done in urine testing, but you typically need to find a functional medicine practitioner to help you with that.
I agree. I think that's really important, mostly because even if a provider can find the test for you, it doesn't mean they can interpret it and know what to do when they find those results. And that's what I think, that's where functional medicine shines.
Yeah, this is not taught in medical school. None of this is taught in medical school. In fact, my story is that I was exhausted all the time. I couldn't get up in the morning. I mean, I had all these symptoms and I didn't understand why, because they didn't teach us this. And it was so confusing because here I am, a doctor, and I don't understand why I feel this way. And how I first got my introduction is I read a book by Suzanne Summers. And I was really resistant to reading the book because you can understand, right? The medical doctors do not like to get our medical information from celebrities, especially Chrissy Snow from Three's Company, right? But when I read the book, and I heard the stories of the women who had symptoms just like me and how much better they felt when they got their hormones balanced, that's what allowed me to open my mind and to go and seek out places where I could be trained in this different way of thinking. And it's based on science and research, but it's not based on prescription drugs. And that's part of the reason why it hasn't really made it to mainstream medicine.
I love it. And I think the real reason why I wanted to talk about this, especially with you, is because I think not only do you have such a great handle on the chemistry of it, but that's the point I want to make. This is a chemical process we're talking about in the body. So very often, especially as women, we're feelers. And so we get caught up in the I'm stressed, I'm busy, I've got this going on, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a business person, I've, the kids, the dog, everything. And those are feelings, those are emotions. Stress to us is an emotion. But I think the bottom line here for everyone to understand is stress is a biochemical process that causes aging.
Exactly.
I think that's so powerful for all of us to understand. So here's where the hope comes in. Because it's a biochemical process, if it were all left up to feelings, then it could fluctuate. And it's hard to control. But because it's a biochemical process, there's a way to shift it, right? We can change it by the things that we do. So let's shift our attention onto things that we can do to improve our cortisol, knowing that most people think, I'm doing the best I can. I can't get rid of the stress that I have.
Right.
Because I know we all think that, but let's talk about what we can
Yes.
do to maybe limit the biochemical storm we have going on.
Exactly. So the first thing that I tell people is it is really not so much how much stress you have. So much of this is about how you allow the stress to affect you. So you have whatever stress you have. And sometimes there are things that you can simplify. Sometimes we create our own stress because we feel like we got to wash the car this often and we got to make sure all the laundry is folded before we go to bed. So maybe sometimes we could be a little bit easier on ourselves and not try to be perfect and not, try to be everything for everybody. And some things maybe aren't so important. So sometimes we can reduce our stress, but there's some things you just can't make go away. And so if you are someone who is a worrier, you relive that conversation over and over again in your brain, like, I can't believe she said that to me. Or you jump to the worst case scenario and think about that. You are taking that situation and you are making it worse. You are just making more of this physiologic reaction, more cortisol going through your body. Whereas if you can let it go, if you can think about the positives, if you can count your blessings and be grateful, if you're spiritual, if you can turn it over to God. I mean, we all have things that we can do to help us to get through where we're through. I really like the idea of if you feel really stressed out right in that moment, if you can say out loud, stop, put your hand up like to yourself, stop. That kind of gets your attention. And then think about 3 things that you're grateful for. And we can all think of things that we're grateful for, no matter how bad the situation is. Even if someone is, at the end of their life and someone is dying, that's a horrible situation, but you can be grateful that they were in your life. We can always find something to be grateful for. And when you feel the emotions of feeling grateful, that is a tremendous way to help calm down those stress hormones. And it literally shifts the chemistry inside your cells, and it allows your hormones to shift, your blood flow shifts, all sorts of things change within you. So what you are thinking about really matters to your physiology.
That's amazing. I've always heard it, or even explained it to patients, that your brain doesn't know the difference. Your eyes and ears, all of our senses take in information, and then our brain does with it what it judges and decides if it's a stressor or not. But our brain doesn't know the difference between what's happening versus what we're seeing versus what we're thinking. So it's almost like we need to make the inputs as soft as possible, right? So even, we all know that feeling of having watched a horror movie and getting that jolt of adrenaline or that stress that we feel being on the edge of our seat. Our bodies, the chemical processes shift that fast. We can always think it's easy, I think, for people to think of it in terms of how we shift into that scary place.
Right.
You can shift into the positive place in the same amount of time. You can mop up that cortisol. A yoga class reduces cortisol faster than meditation. I'm saying meditation, yoga, Tai Chi, all of those
That's right.
exercises, they mop up cortisol. They shift the
Right.
biochemistry quickly.
Yeah.
So these are great
Yeah.
ideas.
Going for a walk is another good one. So for what we're talking about here, using physical movement to calm down cortisol, in ancient times, our stress used to come from things like, the tiger is chasing us and we'd have to run for our life. Well, nowadays we're not running for our life. We're like stuck in traffic, we're, on the internet. So we're not physically burning off that cortisol. And for this purpose, it doesn't have to be a marathon or a triathlon or a boot camp, but yoga, stretching, going outside for a walk, especially on a beautiful day, petting your dog can help to reset this, watching the goldfish swim around the fish tank, being in nature. There's a lot of things that we can do. And some that are really good are breathing exercises, meditation. And some people really like meditation, mindfulness, and some people really struggle with it. And I was somebody who really struggled with it. I think people who are type A and they like to be efficient and get stuff done and their brain is always on, it's really, really hard to turn your brain off. But it's kind of like jogging. Like you wouldn't one day get up, stick your sneakers on for the first time and go run 10 miles. You're going to walk a mile, and the next day you're going to, go a little farther, a little farther. So trying to learn how to do meditation is kind of the same way. Just start with a little bit. The first time I started it about a year and a half ago. And the first time I had a little app that kind of times you, and I sat it down and I did 5 minutes. And after about 30 seconds, it felt like I was having a panic attack because, oh my gosh, how am I going to sit here for another 4.5 minutes? But you get better at it. So breathing exercises are an easier place to start. And I'm kind of a concrete person. So I like this explanation that your diaphragm is that breathing muscle. It cuts you flat, under your lungs. And your diaphragm goes up and down to push the air in and out. And your vagus nerve, which is a big nerve, it's like the size of your finger, it attaches your diaphragm up to your brainstem. So when you do deep breaths, the diaphragm moves up and down more, yanks on that vagus nerve, activates your brainstem to calm everything down. So breathing exercises where you're just breathing in and out slowly, your belly is moving back and forth, that is powerful medicine. And that is free. It doesn't take very much time. You don't have to train to do it. It doesn't, it's easy. Anybody can do it anywhere. And it helps to calm down the stress response, calm down your cortisol level. And if you do it on a regular basis, sort of over your lifetime, it can slow down aging. How simple is that?
It's remarkable to think that just by controlling our breathing, like just taking those deep breaths, we know now that we're stimulating the vagus nerve. What's amazing is a decade ago, I remember reading that scientists had no idea what the vagus nerve was for. They thought it was extra.
Oh my gosh.
Like we came with extra parts or something.
Yeah.
So now we know that we can shift our thinking, we can shift our biochemistry. And I love that. I love that. I mean, I've connected them, but I've not really until now connected that just breathing and being mindful of it makes a difference. It doesn't have to be a meditation or prayer or anything like that. Even just gardening, doing even moving meditation, doing the things that bring you joy. Do it, even if you can only do it for a minute or 5 minutes, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I love it. I love this. Okay, so we've talked about the things that we can do this way. What about nutrition? Does nutrition play a role in this at all?
So it sure does. So of course, you need the right nutrients in your body to be able to make the right hormones. And so we want fruits and vegetables. We want whole foods in the form they're found in nature, not the processed stuff that doesn't have the nutrients in it. So eating a healthy whole food diet is really, really important. So you have the right building blocks to make these hormones, keep yourself healthy. And you really want to avoid sugar because sugar drives your hormones right out of whack. And cortisol is partly responsible for balancing the blood sugar level. So if you're constantly eating a bunch of sugar, your blood sugar spikes up and then it crashes down. And those ups and downs trigger more cortisol release, which makes things worse. So a healthy diet, watch the sugar in the processed foods. That's really, really important. There are certain nutrients that are especially important for your adrenal glands, which make cortisol. And one of those is vitamin C. And vitamin C is actually one of the ingredients your body uses to make cortisol. So if you're not eating fruits and vegetables, which is where we get our vitamin C from, because you're eating, a standard American diet, you don't have enough of the building block to make the cortisol. Another one that's really important is vitamin B5, also called pantothenic acid. And vitamin B5 is necessary for your body to make cortisol. So sometimes when people are struggling and they're tired and, we see that their adrenal glands aren't doing such a good job, we can give them a little bit of extra vitamin C, some extra B5. And those are two of the things that can just kind of help your body to do a better job, making sure that you're able to make the right amount of cortisol.
So the other thing that I've always learned was that as blood sugar goes up, so does insulin, so does cortisol. It's part of the symphony where that part of the symphony plays together, right?
That's right. So high cortisol drives you to diabetes and it makes your insulin up and they ping pong back and forth to cause each other to go up. The other thing that is very related is your thyroid function, because when cortisol is high, it shuts down your body's ability to use the thyroid hormone. So your thyroid gland might be fine. It might be putting the right amount of thyroid hormone into your system, but you can't activate it. You can't convert the T4 from your thyroid gland into the T3 that your cells need. So you feel like you're hypothyroid, but your thyroid labs are normal. And I see this all the time. Women come in saying, I was sure it had to be my thyroid, but I saw my doctor, he said everything was normal. Well, if that's the case, there's a few reasons for it, but one maybe it's your cortisol causing the problem.
And very often there's actually a test, right? Reverse T3.
Yes, exactly.
Reverse T3 will tell your doctor if cortisol is the cause or playing a role in your thyroid symptoms, right?
And measuring and measuring a free T3 level too. But those are not usually done. And it's hard.
Very
Even if you
rarely.
ask, doctors aren't trained. They aren't sure whether your insurance will cover it. They don't want you to be mad if you get a bill. They don't really know what to do with the results, how to interpret it. And so typically they don't really cooperate so much with ordering that test.
And that's part of the challenge, I think, with conventional medicine is, some of us can find a doctor that will run tests for us. But at the end of the day, the only purpose of running tests is if you know what you're going to do with that result.
And it's just not something that we're taught at medical school. So it's not the doctor's fault. They just don't.
No.
Yeah.
Right. And that's probably why you'll get the reluctance, because I think in medical school you're taught, don't test if you don't know if it's not going to make a difference in what you do.
Right.
And so that's usually why I find that very often women will get pushback on certain labs like that. But wonderful. Gosh, this is so valuable. So does everyone get it? Like what we do, what we think, how we interpret, it's all perspective. What I didn't hear you say one thing about reduce your stress, simplify your life, even though those are important.
Right.
Very often the pushback is, I can't.
Yeah. When you are stressed out, overwhelmed, exhausted, just getting through your day is stressful. And so it's not so easy. But these are some simple things that you can do no matter how stressed out and exhausted you are.
And then let's end it with a little bit, because I know you're a huge advocate for self-care, right? So the things we've talked about, eating well, getting out, moving, breathing, what are some other simple things?
So one is to remember that self-care is not selfish, and it's important to look after yourself, because when you don't feel good, when you are not your best, it doesn't just affect you. This affects your family. This affects your loved ones, the people who care about you. So the people who depend on you need you to look after yourself. And so get a massage, take some time to, have a bubble bath, put some lavender in the bubble bath and just soak for a little bit. Having some time in some peace and quiet that is for you is very therapeutic. It's very healing. But how we often feel, if we were going to go take a bubble bath, we sit in the bubble bath and think about all the laundry that needs to be folded, the dishwasher needs to be unloaded. What do we need to put on the grocery list? And so it's important to know that it is okay to just take some time for you. It will make you a better version of you, and then you will be able to do a much better job when you go out into the world to do all the wonderful things that you want to do.
I love that. I will leave it at that, because I think it's perfect. So the message is, right, we control our perspective. We take care of ourselves so that we can do all of the things that we're meant to do. We can take care of others, and we can live with purpose and living ageless, right? So I always bring it around to the name of this podcast is Evolving Ageless. And it's because we're not expecting a 180-degree radical shift in your life overnight. Each week we learn new topics, we learn new tactics for things that help us live a better, healthier lifestyle. And I've said this, that, for me, the journey to 50 went by in a flash, because I was busy with my career and my family and everything external to me. and I got to the top of the hill. And I know some older people will tell me that I'm not at the top of the hill yet, but at 50, it's midlife. I'm at the top of the hill. And for me, I want to share with everyone this idea that we can stay at the top of the hill as long as possible. It's not always just get to the top and head down. And tips like this, gosh, Dr. Matthew, these are brilliant because these are things that change our aging trajectory. It changes where we will be in 10, 20 years.
Exactly. And,
So
and
powerful.
it's important to know that we have the power and we have some control over this. It's not normal if you're not feeling good, and there's a lot you can do to feel better.
That's right. So Dr. Matthew has a book, I've already said, it's called This Is Not Normal, right? Which is great. A Busy Woman's Guide to Symptoms of Hormone Imbalance. So you can learn even more about that. So if you go to the evolvingageless.com website, in these show notes will be everything about Dr. Matthew's practice. She practices in Charlotte, North Carolina. You'll have a link there to her own organization, Signature Wellness, and then also isityourhormones.com, and this book. She's actually giving our audience a free copy of her book. This Is Not Normal. So definitely go to evolvingageless.com, grab that free copy. This has been amazing. Thank you, Dr. Matthew, so much for taking the time and sharing this really, really important message that I think we tend to blow off as women.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I think this is important, and I hope that it helps people.
I know that it will. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and I'll see you next week.